When I got my first job in tech sales, I had no formal sales experience. Even growing up, I didn't even have other sales jobs at all. But I really wanted to break into the industry, and since then, I've helped tons of people break into tech sales for the first time themselves as well. So I wanted to make a video about how you can interview and the things that you need to do to set yourself apart as someone with no sales experience when you are competing against others who do have past and relevant experience. I think it's very important to set the stage that especially in tech sales, it's much more of a consultative nature. So this idea that maybe Hollywood has of like high extrovert, high bravado people, salespeople, etc., doesn't hold true. I work with people that are introverts. I work with people that are extroverted and more towards your like typical salesperson archetype. Any type of personality works well if you truly understand what tech sales is about. If you're coming from a different career and you've never sold anything before, or maybe you're just out of college, the important thing to do is start thinking in the terms of a hiring manager. And by extension, what do they think is important? Managers are evaluated on a few criteria, which can be any of the following: annual recurring revenue or ARR, total contract value, TCV, number of new logos they acquire, so new companies that sign on with your company. Churn is another big one as well. How many people are using the platform or the product for a year and then no longer choosing to use it? These are important things when we're considering how we're going to align our background, even if it's not in sales, to what a sales manager cares about. So from a preparation and resume and interview side, what we want to start doing is building stories around those metrics. Have we done anything in the past that impacted revenue? Or even as an example, if you have no formal work experience, did you do something like in an organization where you raised money? Did you raise $1,000, $10,000, etc.? Are there quantifiable metrics around money or revenue that you can put on your resume as past relevant experience? And what that's doing is allowing you to create a story when you're actually in your interview about how you did that. So even if you're an engineer, even if you're an accountant, even if you're a teacher, did you do something where as a teacher you raised money to get school supplies? As an accountant, you found a way that they could reclassify expenses and you saved a company $20,000. Great example. As an engineer, maybe you did something that, in the case of like a mobile app, did you add a feature that increased engagement or decreased churn or the number of people leaving the platform? Did you do something or solve a problem that impacted the revenue for your company or improved the customer experience for the end user, etc.? These are just some great ideas, and you want to build stories around that when you're in an interview setting that are talking about the impact to the business in terms of revenue, in terms of user engagement, in terms of customer experience, if there's anything that you can talk to in that regard. On the flip side, it's also very important to actually understand what tech sales is. And this is where I see so many people that maybe, as an example, not calling this industry out just on its own, but for instance, people will come from logistics, which in my experience, in my limited knowledge of that space, is a very high volume and more transactional type of sale. So you might have calls where, yes, you're building relationships and you're getting repeat business from customers, but when you're actually selling, it's a, hey, I need this, can you do this? What's the price? Here's the price, let's do it, okay. And that's a very quick and transactional sale. Whereas tech sales, in many cases, especially when you have very complex products, the sales process can be minimally and rarely maybe a month to anywhere from 6 to 18 months, even on some more extreme cases, and in some cases maybe even longer than that. So I've seen people come into interviews before from logistics, from car sales, nothing wrong with it by any means, but they're trying to get the sale and they're trying to get the close right then and there, and that's nothing about what tech sales is actually about. When you're selling highly technical products, it's consultative in nature, and what I mean is if a client is reaching out to you, or if you're cold calling into a client, we're not saying, hey, we're this great piece of software, buy us because we do X, Y, and Z. We're asking them about potential challenges that we know our product solves. So maybe in the case of, I don't know, a database, maybe your database goes to extreme scale and can handle petabytes of data or does something unique, right? If you're calling into people, it's like, hey, we have this database that can store petabytes of data. They might be like, okay, I don't care. I don't even have that much data. Like, why would I even care about that, right? It's very different where in the case of a cold call, we're calling and we're asking questions. Like, hey, I noticed you were using this technology and I've seen the growth of your company over 2 years, right? I'm just curious, are you starting to get to the point where you're tracking data into the petabytes and beyond? That's an example of opening a conversation. And what we would do at that point is have a conversation about how they're using their database today. And only if we've identified that what they're doing is a potential fit for what we solve for, then we position the product. And the same thing in an interview setting. I've seen candidates in the example of like a mock cold call, ask one question and say, well, hey, we should really have a call about this. I think it's a great fit. we do X, Y, and Z, and it's like, dude, that's besides the point. Like, that's not even close to what we're trying to do. Again, all that to say, managers are very open to unorthodox backgrounds. But if you come in and you're trying to sell on a false idea of what sales even is, if you think it's like the movies, if you think it's like trying to get someone to buy right away, you're totally wrong. And if you're preparing for interviews, it's more about understanding, as an example, case studies of what the company has done with different clients. It's understanding the high level value that their product provides. So when you're in an interview, you can say, as an example, like, one of the things I'm really excited about with tech sales is that it's much more consultative in nature. And I'm curious, it looks to me, based on my own research, like your value points are these. How would you articulate that, and how often or what cases are you seeing the product provide a ton of value to end users? When you're asking me questions like that are so well thought out and articulated, I'm understanding that even if you're not ready to go and the best tech salesperson right now, you're putting in effort to understand the product, and equally importantly, you're showing me that you're putting in effort to try and understand how the product is actually being sold. You're coming in and you're not saying, oh, I'm this high bravado car sales guy, this logistics sales guy that did really well in a past career, now I want to go into tech sales. You're coming in and understanding the process and trying to learn what tech sales is actually like. Look, again, there's no one silver bullet here, but if you haven't watched a lot of videos on what tech sales is like, or you haven't done a lot of research and you're already starting to apply, I might pump the brakes just a little bit and take a day or two to do a lot more research. Not even on specific companies, but there's a lot of content online discussing what tech sales is about. Obviously, you're here on this channel. There's tons on YouTube I'd recommend you check out. But it's better to have an understanding of what tech sales actually is before you get into it, as opposed to just praying and spraying and saying like, oh, I'm gonna sell myself in the interview. Like, good luck. It doesn't really work that way. The last thing I'd say is, again, you're gonna have situations, especially like right now in the economy, where unfortunately some people have been laid off. You're going to be competing against people with sales experience. And in some cases, candidly, at the end of the day, if it's head-to-head between you and that candidate, they may unfortunately win. But conversely, if you're coming into an interview and you're showing your eagerness to get into tech sales, and you're doing that because of the research that you've done, the way that you're presenting yourself, the way you're asking questions and performing in interviews, now it's almost equally, if not more exciting to me as a manager to hire someone that is still young and hungry, but doesn't have any bad habits or practices from their old company or old job. So I think it's very important to understand that while maybe not having tech sales experience can be a disadvantage, and there are going to be times where unfortunately, yeah, they're going to go with the person that had sales experience, even though you are a great fit. In many cases, it can be a huge advantage, and I am equally, if not more impressed, if you've never had a sales job in your life, and you're coming in and you're talking about how in your past job, even if you were an engineer, an accountant, whatever it might be, you're thinking in terms of revenue. You're saying, hey, as an engineer, I got exposure to the sales process when I did this, or I presented to executive leadership and showed them how the product I was building was driving revenue, or whatever the case may be, right? If you're thinking in terms of sales and you're communicating that in an interview, I see the desire for you to be in tech sales even with no experience. And by extension, like we talked about, if you're doing research and saying, even if you don't know the answers, but you're coming in and you're saying like, hey, I know tech sales is going to be a learning curve, but from my impression of it, I understand that it's maybe, as an example, consultative in nature, or I see, for instance, I spoke with one of your reps, I reached out to them online on LinkedIn before this interview, and I got a better understanding of what that sales process is like, and I'm curious from your eyes, like, what do you see new reps doing well? What do you see the things that reps maybe with no experience in the past have to overcome when they're first coming into their sales role, right? These are great questions that are showing me that you really care, and I'm honestly very inclined to take a chance on you if you're competing against someone with maybe only a year of experience, because you're eager, you're willing to learn, and you've humbled yourself and understand that it's not just something you're going to come in and do because you've done sales before or whatever it might be. So all that to say, we've got other videos on ways to interview, ways to improve your resume. But again, if you don't have sales experience, that's okay. The last thing you want to do is tell yourself that that's a disadvantage. That is a huge advantage if you're doing it right. You're doing the research beforehand, and you're also thinking about your past experience, even if it's like college groups or nonprofit organizations you are a part of, or whatever it might be. If you're already thinking in terms of revenue, you're already thinking in terms of customer acquisition, you're already thinking in terms of churn, you're already thinking in terms of ways that managers are evaluated, and you're doing the research on what tech sales is actually about, you're in a great position to be a very compelling candidate, regardless of if you have formal experience or not. I hope that helps, and we will see you next week. Thanks.